Welcome to Finding Holiness, where we delve into timeless Torah wisdom, revealing the sacred in everyday moments. Join us on a journey to elevate your spirituality and discover holiness in every aspect of life. I'm your host, Rabbi David Kadosh, and together, let's embark on a path of spiritual exploration. I hope you enjoy this next episode. Okay, Perek Tet Zayin, Mishnah Gimel. En me'idin ela al partzuf panim aimahotem. Witnesses cannot testify to identify a corpse unless it's based on what they see on the face, including the nose. Meaning, if they do not see the face, the cheeks in this area, they cannot be sure of the corpse's identity. And it could be that there's other types of simanim signs. You know, the guy had a tattoo behind his leg. The guy had a big birthmark on his shoulder. That's not, you have to see the face in order to say that this is the person that died. You cannot testify that a person is dead unless they saw that the soul left the body. In other words, the guy's dead. Meaning, just because you think he might have died, it doesn't mean that he actually died. You have to see him actually died. Even if they saw that he was severely cut with a sword, or he was hanging from gallows, or a wild beast was eating him. If they didn't see him die, his wife is not allowed to remarry. It's possible that somehow he was saved. You cannot testify with regards to a death of someone unless you saw the body within 3 days. After 3 days, the body begins to decompose, the appearance changes, and you cannot be sure of its identity. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava says, Lo kol adam velo kol hamakom velo kol hasha'ot shavin. Not all men, not all places, not all times are alike. Depends where the person is. If the person's outside in the heat, then yeah, it may decompose faster. Versus if he's in the cold. You know, everything is different. So to be Yehuda ben Bava says you can't give that 3-day timeline. Mishnah Dalit. Nafal lamayim. If a man fell into a body of water and you didn't see him come out. Ben sheyesh lahem sof. Whether it's a body of water that is visible, all the shores are visible, so like a small little pond that you can see all sides. Ben she'en lahem sof, or whether it does not have visible shores, like a large lake or an ocean. Ishto asura, that man's wife is forbidden to remarry. It's possible that he's still alive. You saw him go down, you didn't see him come up. He might have emerged from the waters beyond what the witnesses can see. And even where the shores are visible, it could be that he survived for a long time under the water or whatever, and the witnesses left. So the wife cannot remarry. Amar Rabbi Meir says, it once happened that a man fell into a large pit of water, and he emerged alive after 3 days. Somehow he came out. It's possible for a person to survive in a body of water for a considerable amount of time. Amar Rabbi Yosef disagrees. Maaseh besuma sheyarad litbol b'me'ara. There was once an incident, the blind man who went to immerse himself in water that was in a cave, meaning the shores were visible. It was a small area. V'yarad moshcho acharav, and the guide went in after him. V'shau kedei shetetzeh nafsham, and they both stayed in the water long enough for them to die. And their bodies were never found. Ve'isiu neshotehem. And the sages allowed the wives of these two men to remarry. So here we see that if a person was to immerse in water where the shores are visible, meaning witnesses couldn't see them, it's small enough that you can see the whole place, then Rabbi Yosef says, since they allowed the wives to remarry, you could allow the wives to remarry. There was another situation that happened in Asya. A man who was lowered into the sea on a rope. And when they tried to bring him out, lo ala biyadam ela raglo. They only took out the leg. That's all that was left of him. Amru chachamim. The chachamim said, depends. Min arkuva ulmala tinaseh. If the leg was cut off from above the knee, the wife can remarry. There's no way he could survive such a wound. Too high of a wound, she can remarry. Min arkuva ulmata lo tinaseh. But if the leg was cut off below the knee, then it's possible to survive such a wound, and she cannot remarry. Mishnah Hey. Afilu shama min anashim omrot met ish ploni. Even if a person heard women say this person died, dayo, it's enough evidence for them to believe that that this person is dead. They were talking casually. He may and they can go back and testify. I heard these people talking about it, and they can the wife can remarry. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Afilu shama min hatinokot omrim hare anu holchim lispot velikpot et ish ploni." Even if he heard young kids saying, "We're going to the funeral now of this guy. We're going to go bury this guy," he can now go and testify in the courts. I heard the children talk about this, and she can get remarried. Ben shehu mitkaven, ben she'eno mitkaven. Whether or not that was his intent to do so, that he by saying that the man died was to act as testimony that the guy is dead, or maybe he was just talking with the Chachamim and he didn't really know the situation, it could serve as testimony. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava says, "Be'Yisrael, af al pi shu mitkaven." When a Jew says that someone died, okay, that can be used as evidence. That's not a problem. It can be used as evidence, even when he intended to use as testimony for a man's death. Ubegoy, but when it's a non-Jew, an idolater, imayam mitkaven en eduto edut. But if his intent was to go to court to say that this man's died, his testimony is not valid. We assume that he's lying. He's purposely lying deliberately, and therefore we don't accept his testimony. But if he did it by way of conversation, then that's fine. Then we can accept it. Mishnah Vav. Me'idin le'or haner uror alvana. Witnesses can testify about a man's death if they see the corpse through a lamp or even through moonlight. Umasin al pi bat kol. And we can also allow to a woman to remarry if it was a rumor. You heard this voice that it's not a bat kol like a heavenly voice like it's normally translated. Here it's just a rumor that a voice that proclaims that his husband is dead, even though we don't know who it is, but we can assume. Maaseh be'echad she'amad al rosh ahar. There was once a story with a person who stood on top of a mountain. Ve'amar, and he said, Ish ploni ben ploni mimakom ploni et. So and so from such and such place has died. Halchu ve'lo matzu sham adam. They went to that place, didn't find the guy. Ve'isiu et ishto. But the rabbi still allowed the woman to remarry just from the fact that this man said this on top of a mountain. Veshuv ma'aseh bet Salmon. There was another situation in a city called Salmon. Be'echad, with a guy shamar ani ish ploni ben ish ploni. I, so and so, the son of so and so. Neshachani nachash v'are ani met. I've been bitten by a snake and I'm about to die. This is what he said. I've been bitten by a snake and I'm about to die. Ve'halchu ve'lo ikiru. People went where they heard the voice was coming from. They found a dead man, but they didn't recognize. They didn't recognize him. Is it him? I don't know. I guess it was so the poison caused his face to this color. Who knows? The rabbis allowed the wife to remarry. Okay. So how did this law, the last Mishnah, how did this law of allowing even a woman to testify for that a person died come into practice? Really, a woman is not believed to testify. So this is how it came about. This is the final Mishnah of the Masechet. Amar bi Akiva, Keshiyarati leNehardea le'aber Hashana. When I went down to Nehardea was a city in Babylonia, to establish a leap year. He went from Israel to Babel. Matzati Nehemiah ish Bet Deli. I met Nehemiah from Bet Deli. Amali, and he told me, Shamati she'en masin et ha'isha be'eretz Yisrael al pi ed echad. I heard that the rabbis in Israel don't allow a woman to remarry on the testimony of a single witness. Ela Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. The only one that allowed it was Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. He's the only one that relies on testimony. Venumeti lo ken advarim. I told this man Nehemiah, Rabbi Akiva saying, I told this man Nehemiah, you're right, the only guy that allows it is Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. Amali, emor lahem ishmi. He said to me, tell the rabbis in Israel in my name, Atem yodim sha'medina meshubeshet begiasot. You know that the roads in this country are in turmoil, meaning there's war going on, and I can't go to Eretz Yisrael. Mekublani merabban Gamliel hazaken. I want to pass on the message that I received from Rabban Gamliel the elder, shemasiyin et ha'isha al pi ed echad. That you are allowed to marry off a woman, that woman can remarry al pi ed echad. Meaning not only is it Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, I have a tradition from Rabban Gamliel hazaken. So, when I went to back to Eretz, Rabbi Akiva saying, I went back to Eretz Israel to go tell this to Rabban Gamliel, the grandson of Rabban Gamliel Hazaken. Samach lidvarai. He rejoiced. He was happy. Ve'amar, and he said, Matzanu chaver leRabbi Yehuda ben Bava. We now have somebody else that agrees with Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, namely his grandfather, Rabban Gamliel the elder, that now we can allow women to marry more easily. Now it's not just one rabbi, it's two rabbis. Mitocha devarim niskar Rabban Gamliel. While discussing that matter, Rabban Gamliel remembered a story. Shenehergu harugim betel Arza. That once there were a group of men, unfortunately, that were killed in a city called Tel Arza. Ve'isi Rabban Gamliel Hazaken neshotem al pi yed echad. And his grandfather, Rabban Gamliel Hazaken, allowed these women to remarry just al pi one witness, right? Just like Nehemiah, this man Nehemiah related. And as a result of receiving that tradition, it became established for rabbis to allow women to remarry based on a single witness. And then, okay, that's what I said. And later on, it also became a tradition to allow, not tradition, it became allowed to have a woman remarry, not just by one witness, but even by an Eved, a Kanani slave, even by a woman, and a Shivcha, or Kanani maidservant. Alright, so that was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, Rabban Gamliel Hazaken. However, there's some other opinions. Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Yoshua omrim, en masin ta'isha al pi yed echad. They hold, you're not allowed to marry based on one single witness. Rabbi Akiva says, lo al pi isha, velo al pi eved, lo al pi shivcha, velo al pi kerovim. A wife cannot remarry based on testimony of a woman, nor on the testimony of a Kanani slave, or a Kanani maidservant, or on the wife's relatives. How can this be? Rabbi Akiva was the one that just said this whole story, and now he's saying the opposite? Well, this took place before that whole situation happened, before it was an accepted practice. Originally, yeah, even Rabbi Akiva held that women cannot act as a witness to allow a woman to remarry, but he held back. Amru lo, so this is the following conversation now between the Chachamim and Rabbi Akiva. At this point, Rabbi Akiva holds that a woman cannot testify. Amru lo, the rabbis told Rabbi Akiva, how can you say that a wife cannot remarry based on a woman's testimony? We have a story. Once there was a story, an incident of certain Leviim who traveled to Tzoar, the city of date palms. One of them became sick, got sick along the way. They brought him to a hotel. He goes, you stay here, we're going on our way. On the way back, they went to the clerk, where's our buddy? We dropped him off for you when he was sick. He died and I buried him already. The guy's gone. Nevertheless, the rabbis allowed the man's wife to remarry, and based on this non-Jewish hotel clerk, who was a woman. Amru lo, the rabbis told Rabbi Akiva, should a Kohenet not be as reliable? A Kohenet woman not be as reliable as this non-Jewish hotel clerk? And they allowed that testimony. Amar lahem, Rabbi Akiva told him, when the non-Jewish innkeeper will be believed, Jewish women will also be believed. Meaning, had the innkeeper been believed, you had a valid argument. But now the innkeeper is not believed on her word alone. The innkeeper, no, she didn't just see him die. She brought out the dead man's staff and the pouch and a Torah scroll, everything that was in his possession. So those were the items that served as proof that indeed their friend had truly died and confirmed their words, but her word alone wouldn't have been enough for this man's wife to remarry. And of course, like we said, Rabbi Akiva eventually retracted that and allowed a woman to testify in order to allow another woman to remarry, as was the story with Nehemiah and Rabban Gamliel Hazaken. Usli kalan, Masechet Yevamot, Mazal Tov. Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha omer, Asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zakoi Shel Aficha Achiba.